Hi, my name is Jenny, and this is my project on the finest hours. For this project, I chose my definition as putting somebody else's needs before your own. So for this definition, I decided my aunt would be the best pick. I chose my aunt because she's a special education teacher and she has a master's of science in education, and she's also licensed to teach in Massachusetts any students from kindergarten to grade 12 for severe special needs. Okay, so my first question is, what's a typical day for you in class?
I would say that a typical day for us is probably very similar to a typical day for a Neshoba student or an Algonquin student. Similar to your day, we work on math and science and current events and history. We follow the same calendar as Algonquin students, and we're there Monday through Friday, 8-ish to 3-ish. So very similar to what you guys are doing. I'd say the difference is in my class, I have an RN, I have 3 para-educators, so with me that's a total of 5 adults, and I have only 6 students in class with me, and they're with me all day long. My students are very medically involved. They are all in wheelchairs, and they would typically stay in my classroom for 3 years before they move on to a post-grad program, which is at Shrewsbury High School.
So you said it's kind of like a typical day at Neshoba or Algonquin. So why would you choose special education over general education?
Well, I knew that I always wanted to be a teacher. Even when I was little, I would often correct my friends' coloring pages. I just enjoyed it so much. So I began working on my undergrad at Regis College. I had majored in elementary education, and I was minoring in sociology. As time went on, and I began my practicum, student teaching, it just wasn't feeling like it was the right fit for me. Something was off, and it wasn't what I expected. And so I ended up graduating with an undergrad in sociology, which, although fun, was not exactly practical. So I knew I was going to have to work on a master's degree at some point, but I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work with children though. And so I answered an ad as a para-educator in a classroom in Medfield, and I walked in, and I'll never forget, it was 5 students, all on the autism spectrum. And I was completely thrown for a loop because I had never worked with students with special needs before. But after spending some time there, I just fell in love with it. We were working on social skills, behavior goals. It wasn't just academics.
Yeah.
And I think because each success, as small as it may have been for these students, each success they had, they worked so hard for. It was that much more exciting for me, and those successes also became my successes.
Wow, I can't imagine how hard that must be. But you always say that the good always outweighs the bad in your job. So what would you say the best part is?
The best part is definitely helping these students and their families achieve goals, and I think the best way for me to express that is to tell you about a student I worked with a few years ago. Again, a student on the autism spectrum. I was working in a hospital in a lockdown unit. These were students who lived there 24/7 because they were just too aggressive to live at home. And their families did not know what to do with them, how to work with them, and how to live with them. And so they lived with us, and I was a teacher there. And, this was a student who was so aggressive that at one point he couldn't even be in a classroom with just a few other students. And so he would spend his days for a little while in his bedroom. We eventually had to strip all the furniture out of his room because the amount of property destruction, and he was eventually becoming really dangerous to himself. And so over time with dedicated coworkers, really strong behavioral programming, he was able to come back to class, and I'll never forget the day where I was just watching him sitting at a desk with other students in the room, and he was sitting and he was practicing his handwriting, and he was writing his name, and he saw me watching, and he looked up and he said, "Jamie, look, I can do it." And I had to walk away because I was crying, and you know, a few weeks later, we were able to have his family come back and do day visits with him. And just over time, there was this progression where he was able to go home for our Christmas dinner, which was so huge for him and so huge for his family. And then probably about a year and a half later, he was able to leave our program and move back home. And he was still in a special program. It wasn't a typical school setting. But from everything I've heard over the years, that he's doing really well. And I feel like I can take some part in that, and that putting a family back together, not just helping a student. And so it's definitely the best part of the job.
So I know from talking to you from over all the years, from all the stories you've told me and stuff, that you have your great parts and you also have like some hard parts. What would you say are like the hard parts?
Well, not so much at Algonquin because I work with a different population now, but back when I was working with students on the spectrum, the population I really preferred working with were students that were very behavioral. I was very involved in applied behavior analysis, which is a science. There's a lot of data taking and a lot of working with behaviors, and with that there's also restraint, which sounds really scary, but we were all properly trained to do it. But I'd say the hardest part about that is that when you work with that population, you have to know you're going to be bit. I was bit a lot, scratched, kicked, my hair pulled, my hair ripped out. I've had things thrown at me. I was punched in the eye and had a scratched cornea. I suffered 2 concussions from being thrown into a wall by a student. And over the years, I've had to have 2 surgeries, both on my left hand. One was a broken bone from a restraint, and the other was a broken knuckle from trying to intervene when I had a student who was going after another student, and I went after them both and I tripped over a stool, so I broke my knuckle. So that's a really hard part of the job that comes with the territory. Other difficulties, working with the families. It's some of these families are sad and they're looking for a cure, or they're looking to see, well, when is my child going to be typical? When does my child get to do typical things that other kids get to do? And the answer isn't always that's going to happen for you. So that's very hard. And now working with the population I work with now, where they're more medically fragile, the odds are good that students die. And I have, over the last 13 years, I've lost 3 students. So that's very difficult.
Wow, that must be like a really powerful feeling and everything. So like overall, that must just be like, that like goes to show that that's really like the job for you.
Absolutely. I really feel that I found what I was meant to do. It's very demanding. It's exhausting sometimes. It can be really sad. It can be super frustrating. But in the end, watching these students achieve these goals and being able to live a happy life is really what it's all about. And that's what feels right for me.
So you can definitely tell why I chose my aunt for this interview. She definitely fits the definition of putting other people's needs in front of her own. She's been to the ER many times. She gets scratched, she gets bit, she's had concussions, surgeries. That's something I know I could never put myself into. And for like some people to be able to put themselves into that job and do that for their living is insane and must be like so amazing. And like only special people can definitely do this as a job. And I definitely look up to my aunt for this, and that's why she is my definition for the finest hours.